Welcome back to Narrow Path Doctrine. My name is Jim. Time for another episode here of Verse in Detail. I've been doing a lot of these lately simply because I want to focus on verses that really talk about the sovereignty of God, and not just in salvation, but overall. I hear a lot of professing Christians talk about, oh, I believe that God is sovereign, but then when they continue to talk, you don't really see the sovereignty of God at all in how they believe what God does or what he's done or what he's doing. You don't really see sovereignty at all in what they believe in the God that they've created. It's not the God of the Bible. God is completely sovereign over everything. And this is another verse that really tells us that. This is Proverbs 16:1. It says, "The preparations of the heart in man and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord." That pretty much says it all, doesn't it? It encapsulates a critical truth about divine sovereignty and human responsibility. While man plans and speaks, it is God who ordains both the internal and external outcomes of these actions. The preparations of the heart in man speaks to human intentions and planning. However, these are not autonomous. They are under God's sovereign control. This aligns with the teaching that God is the ultimate governor over all things. Proverbs 19:21 says, "There are many devices in a man's heart, nevertheless the counsel of the Lord, that shall stand." Man's plans are numerous, but God's eternal purposes overrule. Even our most deliberate designs are subordinate to his decrees. Jeremiah 10:23 says, "O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps." This verse confirms that human autonomy is an illusion. God directs the steps of his creatures, demonstrating his meticulous providence. The second clause, "and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord," emphasizes that even our speech is ultimately directed by God. Though we articulate words, God governs what is said and how it accomplishes his purposes. Exodus 4:11 through 12 says, "And the Lord said unto him who hath made man's mouth, or who maketh the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind, have not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say." God's sovereignty over speech is vividly displayed in his assurance to Moses, and Moses didn't want to go. Even a reluctant speaker is empowered by God to fulfill his purposes. Matthew 10:19 through 20, "But when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what ye shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour that ye shall speak. For it is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you." Jesus reiterates that God governs the words of his people, particularly in the moments of trial, ensuring their speech fulfills his will. While God sovereignly rules over the heart and the tongue, this does not negate human responsibility. Man is called to plan and speak in dependence upon the Lord, acknowledging his rule over every aspect of life. Proverbs 3:5 through 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not into thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." Trust and submission to God's sovereignty are the proper responses of a heart that acknowledges his control. James 4:13 through 15 says, "Go to now, ye that say, Today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. For that ye ought to say, If the Lord will, we shall live, and do this or that." Human planning must always be done with humility and recognition of God's sovereign will. God's sovereignty over human plans and speech finds its ultimate expression in the life and ministry of Christ. The plans of man were subservient to God's redemptive purposes in Christ. Acts 2:23, I should say, is an example of this, of course. "Him being delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, ye have taken, and by wicked hands have crucified, and slain. Even the sinful intentions of those who crucified Christ were under God's sovereign plan, bringing about salvation for his people. Isaiah 46:10 says, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. God's eternal counsel is unchangeable and was fulfilled perfectly in Christ, showing his absolute control over history. So in conclusion, Proverbs 16:1 reminds us that our hearts, plans, and words are under the sovereign rule of God. This truth should lead us to humility, dependence, and trust in him. It also assures us that God's purposes are unshakable even when our plans seem to fail. In Christ, we see the perfect example of submission to God's will as he entrusted himself to the Father's sovereign plan in Luke 22:42. All right, that is going to wrap up this episode of Verse in Detail. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up, share it with others, and if you haven't subscribed as of yet, click the subscribe button and the notification bell to receive updates when new videos come out here on the channel. So until next time, remember, true doctrine fuels a living, breathing faith. God bless.